Simon Cowell has seen thousands of talents walk onto that stage. He's heard every sob story, every dream, every desperate plea for a second chance. But on this night, something happened that even he wasn't prepared for. An 80-year-old man stood center stage, holding a microphone with trembling hands, and when he opened his mouth to sing, Simon Cowell, the man known for his razor-sharp tongue and ice-cold composure, couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He could barely breathe. The entire theater fell into a silence so deep you could hear hearts breaking. Because this wasn't just a performance. This was a love letter. A goodbye. A promise kept across the veil of death. And as the old man's voice filled the room, something inside Simon Cowell shattered. The mask he'd worn for decades cracked wide open, and what millions of viewers saw that night was something they'd never forget. Simon Cowell, completely and utterly human. If you want to know how one song changed everything, subscribe now because what happens next will leave you speechless. The America's Got Talent stage is a place where dreams are made and broken under blinding lights. Thousands compete. Few are remembered. But every once in a while, someone walks onto that stage and changes everything, not because of their talent alone, but because of the story they carry in their heart. It was a Tuesday evening. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation. Simon sat at the judges' table in his usual position, black V-neck shirt, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He'd already seen 47 acts that week. Singers, dancers, magicians, comedians. Some brilliant. Most forgettable. He was tired. He was ready to go home. Then the stage doors opened, and an elderly man walked out. He moved slowly, carefully, as if each step required concentration. His gray cardigan hung loosely on his thin frame. His white hair was neatly combed. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the microphone stand. The audience, expecting someone younger, someone flashier, fell into a confused silence. Howie Mandel leaned forward. "Hello, sir. What's your name?" The old man cleared his throat. His voice was soft, weathered by time. "My name is Harold. Harold Matthews. I'm 80 years old, and I'm here to sing a song." Simon raised an eyebrow. 80 years old. That's quite an age to start a singing career, Harold. Harold smiled, but it was a sad smile. The kind that carries weight. "I'm not here to start a career, Mr. Cowell. I'm here to finish something I started 60 years ago." The judges exchanged glances. Sofia Vergara placed a hand over her heart. Terry Crews, standing stage left, shifted uncomfortably. Something about Harold's tone suggested this wasn't going to be a typical audition. Simon uncrossed his arms. "All right, Harold. Tell us. What song are you singing today?" Harold looked down at the microphone, then back up at the judges. His eyes glistened. "I'm singing Unchained Melody. It was my wife's favorite song. I sang it to her on our wedding day in 1964. I sang it to her every anniversary for 58 years. And 3 months ago, I sang it to her one last time, in a hospital room, as she took her final breath." The studio went completely silent. No one in that theater, or watching at home, was prepared for what those words would unlock. Simon's expression changed. The cynicism vanished. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Harold." "Thank you?" Harold's voice cracked. "She made me promise something before she passed. She said, 'Harold, you've got the most beautiful voice I've ever heard, and you wasted it singing only to me. Promise me you'll sing it one more time. For the world. So they know how much you loved me.'" Tears were already forming in Sophia's eyes. Howie looked down, unable to maintain eye contact. Even the cameramen adjusted their positions, sensing they were about to capture something extraordinary. Simon nodded slowly. "Then let's hear it, Harold. Sing for her." Harold took a deep breath. The music cued. The opening notes of Unchained Melody filled the theater, a song that has made millions cry, a song that carries the weight of longing, love, and loss in every note. And then Harold began to sing. His voice was not perfect. It wavered. It cracked in places. But it was real. Raw. Soaked in 6 decades of love. Every word he sang wasn't just heard, it was felt. The audience sat frozen, many with hands over their mouths, tears streaming down their faces. Simon sat completely still. His jaw tightened. His eyes locked onto Harold. For the first time in years, Simon Cowell wasn't judging. He was listening. Truly listening. As Harold reached the chorus, something extraordinary happened. His voice grew stronger. It was as if his wife's spirit was there with him, lifting him, giving him the strength to finish what he'd promised. The entire theater felt it. A presence. A love so strong it transcended death itself. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. Simon's hands moved to his face. He covered his mouth, trying to hold back the wave of emotion crashing over him. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were now filled with tears. He blinked rapidly, but it was no use. The tears came anyway. How he openly wept. Sophia clutched her chest, her face wet with tears. Terry Crews turned away from the camera, shoulders shaking. But it was Simon's reaction that stunned everyone. Because Simon Cowell doesn't cry. Simon Cowell doesn't break. Simon Cowell is the wall that every contestant must climb. And yet, there he was, completely undone by an 80-year-old man singing a love song to a woman who was no longer there. Harold finished the final note. His voice hung in the air for a moment, then dissolved into silence. He lowered the microphone, his hands still trembling, and looked at the judges. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, Simon stood up. He walked out from behind the judges' table, something he almost never does. The audience gasped. Harold looked confused, unsure of what was happening. Simon walked onto the stage. He stopped a few feet from Harold and just stood there, staring at the old man with an expression no one had ever seen on his face before. Vulnerability. Respect. Heartbreak. Harold. Simon's voice was barely a whisper, but the microphones picked it up. I've been doing this show for years. I've heard thousands of singers. I've given out plenty of compliments, plenty of criticisms. But I want you to know something. He paused, struggling to find the words. What you just did, that wasn't a performance. That was the most honest, most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed on this stage. You didn't sing that song for us. You sang it for her. And I promise you, Harold, she heard every word. Harold's face crumpled. Tears poured down his weathered cheeks. Simon reached out and placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. For a moment, the two men just stood there, one at the beginning of understanding love's true depth, the other at the end of a lifetime spent living it. The audience erupted. Not with applause, but with something deeper. A collective sob. A release of emotion so powerful it felt like the walls themselves were crying. But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. Simon walked back to the judges' table. His hand hovered over something. The audience noticed. They started screaming. Because they knew what was coming. Simon looked at Harold one last time. Harold, I don't do this often. In fact, I've only done this a handful of times. But tonight, I'm not doing this because you're talented. I'm doing this because you reminded me what this show is really about. It's not about winning. It's not about fame. It's about moments. Real, raw, human moments. And then Simon Cowell slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. The entire theater erupted in cheers, applause, and tears. Harold stood in the center of the stage, bathed in gold, his hands covering his face as he sobbed. Simon remained standing, watching the confetti fall, his own face still wet with tears. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't try to hide. For once, Simon Cowell let the world see him exactly as he was. Backstage, producers were stunned. Camera operators wiped their eyes. Crew members who'd worked on the show for years said they'd never seen anything like it. One stagehand later admitted, "I've worked in television for 20 years. I've seen everything. But watching Simon break down like that changed something in me." Harold was escorted off stage, still crying, still clutching the microphone he'd used to sing his final promise to his wife. As he walked past Simon, the two men locked eyes once more. No words were spoken. None were needed. Later, when clips of the performance went viral, comments flooded in from around the world. "I'm a 45-year-old man and I cried like a baby. This is what true love looks like. Simon crying broke me more than the performance. That wasn't an audition. That was a funeral, a wedding, and a love story all at once." The video accumulated over 200 million views in less than a week. It was shared across every platform, every language, every corner of the internet. People didn't share it because it was entertaining. They shared it because it was real. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. In the days that followed, Simon rarely spoke publicly about that night. But in one interview, when pressed about his reaction, he finally opened up. "I've built my career on being tough," Simon said quietly. "On being the one who tells people the truth, even when it hurts. But Harold taught me something that night. He taught me that some truths are too beautiful to critique. Some moments are too sacred to judge. And some love stories are so powerful that all you can do is stand back and let them wash over you." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "I think about my own life. My own relationships. And I wonder if, when I'm 80 years old, I'll have loved someone so deeply that I'd stand on a stage and bare my soul to the world just to honor their memory." Harold didn't come to that stage to impress us. He came to fulfill a promise. And in doing so, he reminded all of us, me included, what it means to truly love someone. Harold never pursued a music career after that night. He didn't need to. He'd done what he came to do. He'd honored his wife. He'd kept his promise. And in the process, he'd given millions of people around the world a glimpse of what real, enduring love looks like. Simon Cowell has continued judging on America's Got Talent. He's still tough. He's still critical. But those who know him well say something changed after that night. He listens differently now. He sees people differently. Because Harold didn't just sing a song that night. He opened a door in Simon's heart that had been closed for years. And sometimes, late at night, when the cameras are off and the stage is empty, Simon thinks about an 80-year-old man with trembling hands and a voice full of love, and he remembers the most important lesson he's ever learned, that the greatest performances aren't about talent. They're about truth. Harold's performance became more than a viral moment. It became a symbol. A reminder that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It lives on in the songs we sing, the promises we keep, and the tears we cry when we remember. 3 weeks after the audition, Harold returned to the AGT stage for the live shows. This time, he wasn't alone. His daughter and grandchildren sat in the front row, holding photos of his late wife. The audience knew who he was now. They'd seen the viral video. They'd cried with him. They'd shared his story with millions. When Harold walked out, the entire theater stood and applauded before he'd even reached the microphone. Simon stood too. So did Howie, Sophia, and Heidi. It was a standing ovation before a single note was sung. Harold performed again that night. A different song this time. What a Wonderful World. His voice was stronger now, steadied by the knowledge that he'd already done what he came to do. He wasn't performing for judges anymore. He was performing for everyone who'd ever loved and lost. For every widow, every widower, every person carrying the weight of a goodbye they weren't ready to say. When he finished, Simon didn't need to speak. He simply placed his hand over his heart and nodded. The gesture said everything. Respect. Gratitude. Recognition of a life fully lived and a love fully given. Harold didn't win America's Got Talent that season. He didn't need to. His victory had already happened the moment he stepped on that stage and kept his promise. But Simon made sure Harold knew something before he left. In a private moment backstage, away from cameras and crowds, Simon pulled Harold aside. Harold, I want you to know something. In all my years doing this, I've met winners and losers, stars and forgotten names. But you're the only one who made me question what success really means. You've already won everything that matters. Thank you for reminding me of that. Harold smiled, the same sad, beautiful smile he'd worn from the beginning. Mr. Cowell, my wife used to say that the best songs aren't the ones that make you famous. They're the ones that make you feel. I think you understand that now. Simon did. For the first time in his career, he truly did. Years later, when interviewers asked Simon about his most memorable moment on AGT, he doesn't talk about the acts that won. He doesn't mention the viral sensations or the record-breaking performances. He talks about Harold. About an 80-year-old man who taught him that the most powerful thing you can do on stage isn't to impress people, it's to remind them what it means to be human. Simon gave Harold the golden buzzer that night. But in truth, Harold gave Simon something far more valuable. He gave him back his humanity. And for that, Simon will be forever grateful. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember what love really looks like. Subscribe so you never miss moments that remind us why we're here. Leave a comment and tell us about someone you'd sing for. Because Harold's story isn't just his story. It's all of ours.